My knowledge of Ratchet & Clank is very limited, having only played the 2016 reboot, remaster, whatever you want to call it, and I thought it was an alright game. The story didn't do much for me. The gameplay was fun at first, but towards the end the combat grew dull as the weapons lost their wow factor over the hours, and the game stayed very easy for the majority of its duration. However, I did enjoy just how vastly different the planets were and how enticing they were to explore. I think I ended up getting a majority of the golden bolts and cards. Regardless, when a new Ratchet & Clank game was announced, I wasn't over the moon for it, but even still, it left quite the impression because, oh my god! This was the first true next-gen showcase. Ratchet was flying through dimensions like nobody's business and dragging himself to other parts of the level at the snap of a finger. Not only that, but the game was a visual marvel and is honestly still the greatest showpiece for the consoles. Sadly, I never played the game at launch because, as I said before, I just wasn't into the 2016 game. However, it did go on sale for pretty cheap one day, and I just thought, why not? Worst case scenario is I find out Ratchet & Clank just isn't for me. I guess you're dying to know the answer to that question, so let's hop right into it. The game starts very discreetly with Ratchet seemingly undercover for some reason or another, and this greedy little Lombax isn't happy with just being besties with Clank now as he steals another robot. Soon after we see what's under the helmet and can't say Ratchet transitioning was on my bingo card, but hell yeah, you go girl! Okay, so this isn't actually Ratchet, which is surprising since Lombaxes were believed to be extinct or damn near close. Rivet is part of the Resistance group who seek to put an end to Emperor Nefarious's tyrannical empire. How Nefarious became an empire is beyond me, but anyway, the bot Rivet grabbed was an info bot. Take a wild guess at what it contains. However, we don't get to figure out what info it's got as Rivet is wanted and seemingly is about to get caught before we see our good old pals. And Clank has a surprise for Ratchet, that being the Dimensionator 9000 so he can use it to find other Lombaxes. But as games go, you can't have anything without a bit of conflict. Dr. Nefarious, not to be confused with Emperor Nefarious, nabs the Dimensionator, and after a little chase, Ratchet catches up and breaks the Dimensionator, which unfortunately causes total chaos. Although fortunately leads to a super impressive intro sequence where creatures from other dimensions are wreaking havoc while Ratchet and Clank get sent through dimension after dimension until eventually Ratchet and Clank get split apart, which I think is a series first. Obviously there were portions where they would have a section on their own, but they've never been rifts apart. Fortunately for Clank, he gets saved by an R-word. Rivet. What were you thinking I was gonna say? Sadly, she's not that big a fan of robots. I'm sure that has no story significance at all. Ratchet and Rivet from then on travel across planets and dimensions, gathering the parts needed to make a new Dimensionator to send Dr. Nefarious back to his own dimension. At least when they're not busy texting and driving. Way to go, genius! Between that are excellent character moments. You find out pretty quickly Rivet and Ratchet are basically opposites. He loves robots, she doesn't. She finds it hard to forgive people who do wrong, while Ratchet tries to see the good in people and is willing to give them second chances. As time goes on though, Rivet begins to banter along with Clank and they become great partners. So I guess the question you're probably asking is, who is Ratchet left with? Well, no one. He's left alone for quite a while. That is until Ratchet meets Kit, who's Clank's dimensional counterpart, and just like Rivet, also struggles with trust issues. But it's more out of feeling like they're protecting people by not letting them in, since she can transform into a big f***-off robot and almost turns Ratchet into red mist. Unfortunately, we find out someone else wasn't as lucky as us because she ripped off an intruder's arm. I'm sure this won't be used at some point in the story and cause a conflict between characters. That would be crazy. The writers definitely focus more on the comedy than intriguing clashes with the characters because you can kinda see them coming from a mile away. Not that that makes the story bad or anything, like the series has always been known for its comedy and not extremely rich storytelling. It just made it hard to really care when things are very predictable and told through jokes or immediately followed up with humor. But the game is very well written because it got quite a lot of laughs out of me and was just a fun time, not just from the story but the gameplay as well, which we should get into now. Every planet you visit is very distinct from one another and each have at least one big set piece moment that makes them memorable, whether it be playing small minigames in a pirate theme park or speeding around at the speed of sound in the wastelands. A bit redundant, that one. While getting from point A to B is fairly linear, that doesn't mean it's not fun. The movement starts pretty simple with just your basic jumps and glide, then you get new boots that allow you to dash and wall run, and mixing that with your new tether ability allowing you to grapple to certain points makes every bit of platforming fun. It never challenged me at all, but it never needed to, since the responsiveness of the controls and the excellent animations made platforming very satisfying. Oh yeah, you also get rocket shoes which make you go fast, but I never really used them outside of the wasteland since every other place is pretty tight knit. Music also accompanies you through the levels, though it doesn't make itself very prominent. It fills its job good, which is usually cinematic strings to add atmosphere, and it feels a little generic. It didn't really heighten any moments for me. I was more wowed by animations or set pieces and never really noticed the music even in cutscenes, but obviously I was focusing more on dialogue as one does, but yeah. Can't say any of the music joins the memories this game gave me. On your way to the next story moment, you'll be constantly tantalized with collectibles that sometimes you can't grab unless you conjure up some creative way of getting them like I did here. Collectibles come in the form of golden bolts, infobots, and voice messages. The two latter ones offer more insight into characters in the world, and is the only time this game being fun is a detriment because I didn't take the time to read or listen to either since I was just having a blast playing the game. Speaking of fun, that's basically what the golden bolts unlock. They're essentially what cheat codes would unlock back in the day, like the classic of big heads. Most are cosmetic like skins and filters, but others are very helpful for New Game Plus, assuming they actually work. I never tried. They give you infinite ammo and health, so you should be able to breeze right along a replay. While there is side quests, I only managed to find a few and never saw them to completion since most of them were collecting more things and I just wasn't down to do all that. The only standout one I did was still not great, but it was different, so we take those. You defend a thing from enemies, however, it's not really challenging and gets repetitive fast, but at least the dialogue during it eases some of the boringness because even the side characters are pretty well written despite you only having a few interactions with them. Moreover, across your dimensional journey, you'll shockingly stumble upon pocket dimensions that ask you to complete bite-sized challenges, typically of the platforming variety, where you're rewarded with a piece of armor, and I completely misunderstood what the number meant. I thought it was how many of that one piece you needed to find to get it until I looked in the armor menu and oh, that's how many you need to complete a set. Every piece increases some stat by 1%, and luckily you don't need to equip them for the stat, so it's quite the incentive to do the challenges as it just makes your overall adventure a little easier. But would you believe me if I said there's something that makes life a lot easier? There's these things in the shop called weapons, and Rift Apart shines in its weapon designs. Not a single weapon is your run-of-the-mill pea shooter. Okay, most aren't your standard pea shooter. One of the first guns I got was a beefy little thing that you charge up and then unleashes a giant laser, which feels like an endgame weapon, but no, you get her right from the start. And while most other weapons don't give the wow factor that that one did, they're still cool and still have uses. Like, it's crazy that every weapon on this wheel I have used multiple times. You get a sprinkler that turns enemies to grass and locks them in place, robot ankle chompers, a mushroom that pulls enemies' attention away from you, and then you get your more standard issue stuff. However, every weapon is basically a 2-in-1, as using them increases their level that makes them slightly stronger each time until it reaches level 5 and evolves, for lack of a better term, which to my surprise made them even more overpowered since throughout the game you find Ray or Titanium. The joke is that it's not rare at all, and it's used to buy small upgrades for the equipment, but they add up over time and become pretty darn good, hence my surprise when they got even crazier at level 5. I got actually quite a lot of the weapons to their max level because there's an arena you can fight in, which so happens to be my favorite side activity since it's just combat, but there are stipulations so it never gets old. Most of them limit you to just one weapon, and it was ones I never really used, so I got to see their potential and then ended up using them more. That's game design, folks. You know, I wish I had more to say, but I've covered basically everything there is to say. I could become one of those YouTubers that makes like 14-hour-long video essays by dragging out one point for way too long, but I don't got the energy for that. Rift Apart is just a damn solid game. I don't think it made this series one of my go-tos going forward, as the rewards for exploration just weren't good enough for me to want to go back since I didn't care much about the world. However, my interest will at least be a little more piqued if a new Ratchet Clank game gets announced. Anyway, that does it for this video. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like and stay tuned for my next video that will be me ranting about Skate. I have some choice words for that game. Alright, see you all then. Bye bye!